everybody. Welcome to the Jim Masters Show, Entertainment Lifestyle Celebrity Talk Show series. On this episode, we are celebrating and remembering and loving Superman. Who doesn't love Superman, right? We all grew up with Superman in his various ways, shapes, and forms, whether it's television, the series, or maybe the comic books or the movies. And we have somebody who is all about Superman. Matter of fact, he's in a room that's surrounded by everything Superman and TV trivia and memorabilia as well. Edward Gross is joining us. He is somebody who's immersed in the world, and he has put together what is the definitive history of Superman. And we're going to talk about that and lots more. You have so much more. You can behold the most comprehensive book about Superman ever produced, from Krypton and Smallville to Metropolis and beyond, and explore over 80 years of Superman's history in radio, TV, film, animation, computer games, PSAs, advertising, merchandising, and so much more, including comics. It's the ultimate official book featuring a wealth of unpublished artwork, exclusive interviews, unique bonus inserts, and little-known facts detailing the long and extraordinary history of the world's first and greatest costumed superhero in all the different forms, of course. Remember this, Adventures of Superman from the television series and all kinds of animated versions as well. And of course, Christopher Reeve, we know, played Superman, and so many others. We're going to talk about all that and so much more with our very special guest. Our special guest, Ed, he has been somebody who is immersed in everything Superman, but also in everything entertainment as well. He's not just a super fan, gang. He is an expert. He's a historian. He's senior editor, entertainment editor at womansworld.com and firstforwomen.com. He focuses on classic TV and film. And for the past 40 plus years, he's taken a lifelong passion for those mediums and turned it into a career as an entertainment journalist, serving on the editorial staff of a variety of publications, among them Movie Magic, Life Story, Cinescape, Starlog, Femme Fatales, Geek Monthly, and CFQ. Additionally, he has written numerous books, nonfiction, and a novel as well. I've done that over the past 35 years, among them the 2-volume, The Unofficial Oral History of Planet of the Apes, produced by or published by Bearmanor Media, and that just came out. That's a cool one. Remember that great series, and Roddy McDowell and Company. And Ed also, in addition to all of that, he's a New York kid like I am. He's out on Long Island, and we're all here in the tri-state area. Nobody does it better. The Unofficial Oral History of James Bond is another of his. The 2-volume, The 50-Year Mission, The Unofficial Oral History of Star Trek, and also Fleischer and The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. We're just talking about that. And his greatest satisfaction comes from the fact that he has written with writer Mark Waid, calling this really the definitive book on Superman, the Unofficial Oral History, Voices from Krypton as well. I'm going to show you that. That's another terrific one. Yeah, he's really all in with all of this, folks. This is something he really, really loves. And if you are a Superman fan, you're going to love this conversation we're going to have. Also, as I mentioned, that came out in 2023, Voices from Krypton. And now, with Robert Greenberger, he has written the official book on the subject, Superman, the Definitive History. And that literally just came out. You see it on your screen there, folks. It just came out. Who doesn't remember Superman, again, in all of its shapes and forms, whether it's television, it is film. Of course, this is the television series. And we all watched the television series. Matter of fact, growing up in the New York area, the New York tri-state area, we saw it on WPIX Channel 11, 11 Alive. They had Superman, and really cool stuff. So without further ado, for all the Superman fans out there, or fans of classic television, of animation, of movies, and so much more, let's bring on our very special guest, Ed Gross, who's joining us on the heels of heading out to Japan. He's actually heading out to Japan soon. So we want to get him now before he boards that plane. Ed, welcome to the Jim Masters Show series. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm just exhausted for the introduction that I did all that. Where did I find the time?
And that's the condensed, abbreviated Reader's Digest condensed books version.
Really, that's crazy. But thanks for having me.
The pleasure's all mine, and you're looking forward to a cool conversation. So you grew up in the New York area. Superman for you on television on Channel 11, WPIX. Was that sort of your entree into the world of everything Superman?
Yeah, it's when I was about 5, I was in Brooklyn. This is 1965. I found I caught a rerun of The Adventures of Superman and was just blown away mesmerized by what it was. And the funny story I tell is that I didn't realize, like, my father had a comic book called The History of Dogs, and it was the only comic book I'd ever seen, or the first comic book I'd ever seen. And then I heard at the end of The Adventures of Superman that Superman is based on character appearing in this magazine, in Superman magazines from DC Comics. And I put the two together. I mean, I thought the comics were based on the TV show at that point. But that started the obsession with Superman. I mean, that was probably my first pop culture obsession, I'd say. And the combination of the TV show and the comic books led me to start collecting the comics, and then I never stopped and never looked back, and I'm sitting in this room. So it's just been a part of my life since then.
You know, there was always the Superman fans and then the Spider-Man fans, and sometimes it crossed over. You love them all, right?
Well, it's funny. When I was a kid, it was all about the Superman related comics. And when it came to comic books, it was Superman, Action, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, World's Finest, Justice League, whatever it may be. And the only Marvel comic I read as a kid was Spider-Man. And to this day, I mean, I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe much more than I did the comics that were coming out from Marvel, except for Spider-Man. That's been almost as big not quite as obsessive, shall I say, but it's also been a part of my life since I was a little kid as well. He's the one Marvel character. And when they crossed them over in the 70s in a comic, that was mind-blowing to me.
So you were able to take all of this excitement and passion and love for all of this and turn it into a career. You're a senior entertainment editor, you're a writer, journalist, author, historian on many levels. How were you able to take the passion for classic TV, for comics, for all of it, and turn it into a really successful career?
Well, I mean, such a gradual process in the sense of the first writing thing I ever did was I used to be obsessed with a daytime soap opera called Dark Shadows that used to air on ABC at 4:00 Monday through Friday. And Barnabas Collins was the vampire on that show, and there are all kinds of supernatural beings. And what I found was I couldn't get enough of the show, watching it 5 days a week. So I started writing my own little, in retrospect, terrible fan fiction stories, just writing new stories for Barnabas and company. And as I went on and I decided I was going to start writing reviews of things or articles or short stories, and published a fanzine that was, distributed to like me, and maybe a few family members. It was just something I did because I just had a need to express myself. And then when I went to middle school, I joined the school newspaper. I wrote about film and TV there. That continued in high school. And then I started towards the end of high school and the beginning of junior college, started getting interviews for the first time. And that really changed it because I discovered I really love the interview process. And what I really loved is that I was able to take that, I had a little bit of a knack for, certainly for the conversations with people, and turn that into interesting articles, which would eventually lead me to writing these books. And I have been so lucky to be able to not only write about the things that I've always loved, but to tap into them by speaking to the people who are involved, either actors starring in them, directors, writers, behind the scenes personnel, and new versions. As the new versions kept coming up, I kept following up with it. And so all these things I've been obsessed with, I have been very lucky to be able to tap into, and somehow that combination ended up being a career that's allowed me to write books, magazines, staff positions. I mean, just all kinds of things. It's wonderful. It really
Do you ever
is.
feel like a big kid in adult clothing? That's usually what I say we are. We're big kids in adult clothing.
Look at the room I'm sitting in. Yeah.
Tell us about this incredible room.
Oh, what it was is, it's so funny because if people see this, they think, oh, this guy's so obsessed with Superman. That's all it is. And it's not that. It's just that it's a very easy gift to buy somebody. And what would happen is my wife would, for Father's Day, Christmas, birthday, I'd get things with the S on it. And other people would do the same thing. So I ended up with so much of the stuff. We redid our house about 7 years ago. And my wife said, why don't you take all that stuff you've got sitting in boxes, basically, and why don't we create a Superman room for it? And this way you can display all the stuff. And that's what we've done. And her aunt told us to gave us some money during the rebuilding of the house or renovation and said, do something crazy with it. Don't pay a bill. So she did. She got me that statue with that money,
Wow.
which is pretty mind blowing. And then her and my kids for my 60th birthday got me the comic rack. So I went down to the basement, opened up the boxes I had down there, pulled out some comics. And most of these are original from when I was a kid or, growing up. So that's
What do
not
the
actually
kids think
number
about
one,
it?
just so you know, it's not.
Yeah. What do the kids must love it, huh?
Yeah, well, my kids are all adults now, but yeah, they're all, they're into a lot of this geeky stuff too. And I've got one son who's claiming the statue when I'm gone. So yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool. They're into the stuff. The only person not into most of the stuff is my wife, but she's supportive, so that works out well.
You go in your room, close the door.
Yeah,
I'll let
pretty
you
much.
know when
Yeah,
supper's ready.
not as bad as that, but not far from the truth. Yeah.
Not far from the truth. What do you think it is about Superman, that has captivated us all these years in the various ways, shapes, and forms, the various ways that we've consumed it through television, comics, film, animation, all the different people that have been involved in the various versions of Superman. Of course, we're looking at the television version as well. And of course, we always remember the version of the episode of I Love Lucy when Superman was on because Lucy wanted to top, I think it was Carolyn Appleby's kids' birthday party and brought in Superman, which was a beloved episode. She's out on the ledge and with the pigeons and Lucy, get in here.
Never looked better. He looked so good in that episode. It was really amazing.
It was so good. What do you think it is about Superman? Of course, they say these days we're sort of lacking heroes and superheroes in our society. And it was so good for kids and still is today when they see these episodes or read the books, whatever, to find somebody who's doing things for good, who wants things to work out well for everybody, who's there to lend a hand when possible. I mean, the messages along with the action part of it are very deep and very profound. I think that's something great that kids need to hear. What are some of the things you think keep it in our hearts and minds all these years, Superman?
There's a number of things, I think. I mean, when Superman started in 1938, I'll just throw in, created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, he was definitely a force for the oppressed. He was fighting slumlords. He was fighting abusive husbands. He was fighting corrupt government officials. I mean, those are the people he initially went after, and he was kind of more brutal, shall we say, than he is now. But I think what's happened is the concept of Superman has evolved in the sense of what he represents. And yes, he's always represented sort of standing up for the underdog. But he's come to really, and they've really embraced this in recent decades, I think, this notion that he is a symbol of hope. He is the light in the darkness. And that's why you live in cynical times and all that stuff now that we're in and divided. People are so divided. I really do think that he represents something unifying, something to aspire towards. It's very funny. They ended the Superman TV show, Superman and Lois, just a week or so ago. And there's a bit there where Superman decides, or Clark decides, that he's going to give back by using his name to help people, to feed the homeless, to do these different things. So more than just these giant heroic things, he suddenly becomes not only inspirational or aspirational. He's both now at one time. He's both inspirational and aspirational, right? He's getting us to do things, and he's somebody we want to be, which in turn would make us want to do things for that. And, it's a story I've told a number of times, but I really think for me, it crystallizes something about sort of what the character represents, which is that there was a snowstorm some years ago. My oldest son was pretty young then. We were driving down the street in the aftermath, and there's an old guy who had a walker in one hand and a shovel in the other. And he's slowly using the walker to move and then shovel with the other hand, then move the walker and shovel. He's doing a back and forth motion. So I said to my son, we're gonna help this guy out. And he was like, oh, why are we gonna do that? He was young. We got out of the car. We asked the guy if we could help. At first he said no, it was okay. He had it. But then he finally said yes. So my son and I grabbed shovels and we started shoveling his sidewalk. And this old guy is leaning against this walker and he says to me, or it says to us, thanks so much, fellas. My neighbor was sick, so I thought I would come over and shovel his walkway for him.
Mm.
That to me was a tremendous moment in the sense of I always wear Superman shirts. I didn't put it on for today, but I'm often in Superman t-shirts. And when we got back in the car, I looked at my son and I pointed to the S, not that I'm Superman, but I said, it means something. It means you do what you can to help people when you can. And I think that's in its smallest level is what Superman represents. And beyond that, of course, it's who is your Superman, right? Some people just follow George Reeves. In writing the books, I was just amazed at how passionate and single-minded the George Reeves fans are in the sense of that's Superman and nobody else is, but then it could be Christopher Reeve. It could be Henry Cavill, any one of these guys, because Superman is in this unique position. I think it's unique he was created in 1938. Since 1940, there has not been a decade where some version of Superman has not been in production, whether it's animation, as we're seeing now, television, movies, Broadway, and of course the comic books have continued uninterrupted basically since then. That to me is astounding. What is it about this character that he is able to, even when people say he's boring and passé, which obviously I don't agree with, he is still yet constantly being reinvented every decade. We've got a new one starting up. Henry Cavill just ended a couple of years ago. We've got a new one, David Cornsweet, coming next summer. It's just astounding to me. It just goes on and on.
There's even a Superman museum too, right?
Yes, I've been there. Yep.
People may be very shocked that there is one, but tell us about this. This is cool. You've been there. It must be incredible. Is it Illinois?
It's in Metropolis, Illinois, which is a real town and was a real town before Superman was invented. And Jim Hambrick is a guy who was a Superman collector, and he used to tour around the country with his little mobile museum, bringing around all his Superman stuff. And in the 90s, he spoke to the board, I guess, the Chamber of Commerce at Metropolis, and said, I have this idea to make this a permanent home for my collection. They agreed. And he's been there since I think it was 93. I may be wrong in the year, but it's pretty close to 93. And he's there, the funny thing is he's there year round. People think of it as, well, they do Superman celebration there every year. And that's where the museum really, thrives. But from what I've been told by people who work there and Jim's daughter and stuff, and Jim himself, people come there all year round. I mean, it is a tourist spot. It is something that people come to, and they are able to keep that thing open all year round, even though the Superman celebration only happens one weekend in June every year for almost 50 years now, I think. Yeah.
Have you been there more than once?
I've gone there probably at this point 4 times. And I used to go, it's funny, I used to go to New York Comic-Con. San Diego Comic-Con.
San Diego, yeah.
Yeah. And that's when I had magazines that were going to foot the bill and send me. And I went for like 15 years straight, and it was great. My day job back then would finance me to go to San Diego every year, and I'd come out of there with like 100 interviews every weekend.
The world has changed since then, hasn't it?
It has. Publishing has changed. Everything's changed. So nobody's in a rush to do that. So now I'm trying
to foot the bill now. You just get the foot.
Pretty much. Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Now I've pretty much got them, not them, I'm doing myself, is I'm trying to, since I can't go to San Diego anymore, I try to make the Superman celebration now my annual pilgrimage if I'm going to go to a convention anywhere. So, and I go on stage there and I talk about the books and things. So, or I do interviews with the celebrities that are there, or both. And
which is great. And then the fans love that, right? You go to these events, conventions, Comic-Cons, and the fans are super, super excited about it all. And you see lines of people too that surround. There was one for there was a Comic-Con that had everybody, but one had Barbara Eden, and the wait was 4 hours. They just did a Little House on the Prairie reunion because that's like 50 years, and people wrapped around buildings, waiting. It's really extraordinary, isn't it?
It is. And the amazing thing about this is free to the public. I mean, if you're going to get autographs and pictures with the celebrities, yes, you have to pay for that. But the Superman celebration is free, and they get something like 30,000 people a year, every summer, every June, from around the world who come in for this just to share their passion of Superman. So it's not yes, they want to make money. I'm sure they want to make money, but they're not charging admission for this. This is sort of, I always describe it as if at the Andy Griffith Show through a convention, that's what Superman celebration would be. The events
Really?
take place in tents. There are food trucks all over the place, but it's just families that are there loving the character, and you can see it on their faces. They love being a part of this thing, and that's a great thing to witness.
It's really amazing. And again, the fact that there is a museum like
And that
that.
museum's great, by the way. I got to tell you, they got everything. I mean, it's a tight space inside, but it's just astounding what they've got.
Metropolis, Illinois. How cool.
Yep.
I love it.
Yeah.
You're a kid like me. You're a kid of television. You grew up with all the television shows, everything, on ABC, NBC, CBS, all the reruns, especially in the New York area on Channel 5 and 11. They would start on 247 and then rerun on 5, 9, and 11.
Absolutely.
And we all have, the different shows that we've enjoyed. And of course, Superman was on in our house. Spider-Man was on. Wacky Racers. Remember that one? The animation one. And I Dream of Jeannie too. And we even have the I Dream of Jeannie bottle.
Oh, wow. I'm jealous of that.
The actual bottle, hand-painted bottle that was gifted to me from a friend. And I've shown it several times on the show. And even our show open incorporates a little of the bottle.
Yes.
And it's really, really cool. And I've wanted that for such a long time, even when I was a kid. And all of a sudden, a good friend of mine gifted it for a birthday. And then we had a guest, Dreama Denver, who is the wife of Bob Denver, who played Gilligan. She saw the show and she said, I see the Genie bottle and everything else. You need to, knowing that you're a television guy, you need to have a Gilligan. I said, a Gilligan? Or like a life-size Gilligan? Where would we put it? She says, no, you have to have the bobblehead.
There you go.
So here it is from Dreama Denver, the bobblehead, nice. Bob Denver. So I figured I grabbed these. They're usually back on the set, and I wanted to grab these for you because I think you'd appreciate.
Oh, I love all that stuff. Yeah,
nostalgia, and so Superman. Yeah, you're right. It just the value, the wholesomeness to it, the excitement of it, and also, you've made this part of your life's calling in such an incredible way that you've penned these incredible books and much more. I mentioned the introduction. That was just scratching the surface of some of the things that you've had an opportunity to, bring to life for all of us. One of them is this, Voices from Krypton. Tell us about this classic becoming quickly a classic.
I'll tell you, that started, back in 2015, I'm a co-writer on a bunch of the other books. This one I wrote on my own, but Mark Altman came to me and said, look, Star Trek's celebrating its 50th anniversary. Mark and I had written books on Star Trek in the past. And he said, we should do an oral history for Star Trek for the 50th anniversary. And I said,
meet Shatner at all or talk to Shatner?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've got a couple. I mean, I don't want to bore your audience, but I've got a couple.
No. Shatner's great.
Shatner.
I love Shatner. Yeah. You have a Shatner story?
Yeah. I'll tell you one Shatner story. I mean, it goes on a minute, but I've spoken to him a number of times, and this was one in person. We were at New York Comic-Con, and we're doing a roundtable with other journalists about his voicing the character of Two-Face in an animated Batman movie, the one that had Adam West and Burt Ward reprising their roles vocally. So we're sitting there talking, and I'm sitting to his immediate right, and he's answering a question. When he finishes, I just pipe in and I go, so I'm wondering, did you record your part alone? And he looks at me funny and he goes, well, you obviously weren't paying attention. I just answered that question. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. Don't bother. He goes, no, I'll answer it again. So he gives the same answer he just gave. I said, that's a great answer. It's not what I asked. So he looks at me and he goes, what did you ask? I said, well, I asked if you recorded alone. And he goes, oh, yes, I recorded alone by myself with nobody else there. And then he proceeded for the next 10 minutes. After he answered everybody else's questions, he would end it with, by myself, all alone, nobody else there. And as he was getting up ready to leave, somebody said to him, have you seen Star Trek Discovery? That's when the thing was just about to premiere. And he goes, yeah, I attended. It's a lot of fun. Da, da, da. And then he starts to get up to leave. And I just look up at him. I go, did you go alone? And he looks at me and he turns his head sideways, gives that what I call the Shatner grin. And he puts his hand on my arm and he goes, you're going to come with me. And I looked at him and he goes, you didn't invite me. And that was the end. Everybody laughed. He left and people wanted to know if we were taking our show on the road.
How cool is that?
Great story. It's so cool. And so I've got the audio of it, which is great. And
he's fascinating to talk to, isn't he? Just his use of language and inflection, articulation.
He is.
It's like he's telling a story, even in normal conversation.
But what's funny is if you get him in a bad mood, like I had a phone interview with him and he was just didn't want to do the interview and it was so obvious. This is literally how the conversation went at one point, and it was the whole conversation kind of flowed this way. My question was, when you were making Star Trek Generations, this is the first Star Trek movie without Leonard Nimoy, without DeForest Kelley. Here you are on the bridge of the Enterprise, and neither one of them are there for the first time. I imagine that would have to be odd. And his exact response was, it was odd. It got odder as time went on.
Okay.
That's still have
20 minutes to fill.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that wasn't the best one, but he made up for it with the Two-Face one. And another one I did with him when he was voicing the wizard in the Steampunk Engines of Oz or something. An animated.
It's hard to tell when he's serious and when he's not, too, because he just has this quick wit, right?
Right. And that's what he said to me, because he said to me, what'd you think of the film? I said, well, I thought the story was good. The characters are interesting. I said, the animation I thought was eh. And his response to me goes, how do you spell eh? I said, EH, I don't know, and then, so we're talking, we only had 2 minutes, but we're talking at the end of the 2 minutes. I said to him, so for you, what is the power of the film? And without missing a beat, he goes, I thought it was the animation. And then he burst out laughing. I burst out laughing. And that was another funny one. So yes, those are my
makes you work. He makes you work for it.
Close Encounters of the Shat kind, I call it. So there you
go. They're circulating somewhere a fascinating conversation between William Shatner and Neil deGrasse Tyson, just about the meaning of life and what happens, and what happens when you pass away, and just really fast. And he's asking Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist and director of the Hayden Planetarium and everything else, who I had the opportunity to meet and know. Fascinating person. But with Shatner, the two of them having the conversation was amazing, because whenever Neil deGrasse Tyson would say something, oh, really? Are you sure?
Right.
Tell me more. How do we know that?
Right.
Is that fact or is that fiction? It's just really, and you're like hanging on to every word, because he's almost asking and saying things that you're thinking.
Yeah.
Which I think is really fascinating.
When he went to space, he was so moved by the experience of going to space and coming back down again, and say that I went from the light to the darkness. It was as if I was dying. And he was really profoundly moved by the experience of leaving the atmosphere.
And of course, he was in a couple of great episodes of The Twilight Zone.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, the monster on the wing of the airplane, and the other one too, when it was the little jukebox thing, and you put the quarter in, and the little Joker face, and would tell you about what's going to happen and all the rest.
He was obsessed with it, right?
He kept going back to it, and the wife wanted to pull him back, and he wouldn't. And fascinating stuff. This is another great brain, Rod Serling. I tell you, just the Twilight Zone was fantastic.
Yeah,
this what we're talking about. That again, you've really done such beautiful work, which is one of several reasons why I wanted to have you come on the show, is because you're so engrossed in all of it.
Oh yeah,
pun intended, right? Engrossed.
Yeah, right.
Engrossed. See his last name, folks?
I got it.
I'm the master, and he's engrossed.
There you go.
Hailed as possibly the most comprehensive oral history of Superman to me, to be committed to print. Voices from Krypton. It's combining over 85 years of Superman's legacy into the sweeping tale of how the champion of the oppressed became one of the world's most recognized and recognizable pop culture icons. And not only does this epic collection include interviews with so many Superman favorites as well, which is really, Zack Snyder and Tom Welling and so many others, it also dives into Tim Burton directed Nicolas Cage movie that never happened. And you may think you know Superman, but not until you have read Voices from Krypton. Tell us, that's my quick little summary, but tell us about it and what inspired you to be involved in this.
Well, I was doing, like I was starting to say before I interrupted on my little Shatner tangent, that Mark had asked
Oh,
me about
interruptions
doing.
are good. We love them.
Yeah, well, tangents are fine with
Anytime
me.
anything comes in, just throw it out.
Exactly. So Mark asked me if I wanted to do this oral history. And I said, well, what's an oral history? I've never read one. And he turned me on to two of them, one on Saturday Night Live and one on MTV. And I fell in love with the format. So he and I wrote, I think over the next however many years, 5-6 years, we wrote like 7 oral history books on different subjects. And all along through that, I knew I wanted to write one about Superman. I didn't know what shape it would exactly take beyond being an oral history. But then as I got into it, it was really an opportunity to take, first of all, 40 years of interviews I'd been doing, because every time I could, I would tap into Superman and do interviews with people involved with new productions, past productions, whatever it was. So I started with the ground floor of like a bunch of archived interviews, which is, I call them archived interviews. They're a bunch of cassettes in my basement, but it works. And there were a lot of people who are no longer with us that were on those cassettes that I wouldn't have otherwise. So I had that. And then I just started reaching out to people one after the other after the other. And if I couldn't get somebody, but somebody else had spoken to them, I'd get their okay to use their interviews. They get credited, of course, in the book. That's especially true with Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. A guy named Tom Andre had interviewed them in depth, and he told me that I could use whatever I wanted from it. So that's why Jerry and Joe are in the oral history of Superman, because, I had access to those interviews. But it was really just doing interviews with people, spending hours and hours on the phone, and really discovering that every one of those people I spoke to was so passionate about it and really had stuff to say, even if they didn't like a particular version. Even if something wasn't quite their cup of tea, it didn't matter. They were happy to talk about Superman in general and their projects in particular. And then I would reach out to people beyond those there, because I like to give some weight to the people who study this stuff, or the podcast, people who run, significant podcasts devoted to Superman, and comic book historians and authors of other books. And the trick was to interweave all of those different views in with those of the people who were there making the productions. So you're getting the perspective of those who are making it, looking back at it and saying what they feel about it, but also the impact that those creations are making on others. So you get these hosts and like I say, these historians were able to put a lot of it in perspective, which is an important component of it. And then I happen to have a brain for guys as disorganized as I am in life, and I'm very disorganized. I have a brain, it seems, for oral histories. I call myself an idiot savant when it comes to oral histories, because I'm able to put the jigsaw puzzle together. And that's exactly what it is. Taking these disparate interviews with, in the case of Superman, it was like 250 people, and somehow weaving it into a coherent narrative, and a linear one in that book's case, of taking us from before 1938 to when the character was created in like 33, 34, and carrying him all the way through as far as we could go. And they had to pry the book out of my hands because of deadlines. But 333,000 words later, and the story was told up to the point of publication. It was like we brought the story as far as it could. And for me, between this and Superman, the Definitive History, it really is the crowning achievement, I think, of not because it's Superman per se. I mean, that's an important part of it. But of all the writings I've done and all the books I've done over the years, this to me is like the culmination, to the point where you're like, oh, gee, what do I do next? I've done this twice.
How do you top yourself, right?
How do you top yourself? Now I don't worry about topping myself, just keep working and, paying the mortgage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tell us about Superman, the Definitive History, because this has been hailed by many as such in a way that, doesn't always happen. And it's really glorious and must have really taken a long time to compile, put together, and then just be satisfied where you're like, this is good. I think we've captured what we've needed to capture here.
Well, the beauty of it is that Robert Greenberger, who I co-wrote the book with, he and I were responsible for the text and some captions and things like that. our editor, Tim Pilcher, and the people at Inside Editions, they had to put it together. They're the ones who went into the Warner Brothers archives, to the DC Comics archives, and pulled everything they could that was just would make this a unique experience. And that's the big difference between this and the other book, The Voices from Krypton, is that this has the access to all the photos and stuff and all the illustrations and production art. And it's an astounding production. Even if I didn't write it, I would be sitting here singing its praises because, first of all, the thing is huge physically. It's like it weighs something like 16 pounds and it's oversized, and it's just really an astounding piece of work. And they did it. So between our writing and their production aesthetic for it and the research they did, I just can't imagine a better package, you know. And for me, of course, there is this really personal satisfaction in having written what I consider, and Mark Waid considered, the definitive look at Superman with Voices from Krypton, but then turn around and so that's the unofficial book, and then turn around and write the official book. That just doesn't happen. Writers don't usually start off with an unofficial book and chance to write the official book, but I am so grateful for the opportunity because I got to tell the character's history twice in two very different ways.
Absolutely. What's the response been so far to it? I'm sure, real diehard fans, when anybody's a real diehard fan of something, they feel a personal connection to it. They know everything. They know the dialogue, the dates, they know it all. They've probably fallen in love with this too, huh?
It's the response so far has been amazing. I don't know how anybody who's a fan or even just like a student of comic book history couldn't pick up this book and just be blown away by it, just because the imagery alone is phenomenal. It's just an amazing package. I know I'm just being sounds like I'm being a shill for the company and just say, oh no, you got to get this book. It's amazing. Yeah. But it is. It's like during the process, Tim Pilcher went on video with me on a Zoom call and was taking me through the various pages of the book. You would turn the page and I'd be like mesmerized, just staring at these beautiful imagery that went along with the text and just blown away by it. But to hold the finished book in my hands is just an incredible thing. And like I say, everybody is loving it. Bitsy Tulloch, who played Lois Lane on Superman and Lois, went on Facebook just a few days ago and said, Superman fans, you better know about this one. And she like heralded how good the book was. I mean, it's just amazing. It really is so satisfying to have a subject that you love so much and have the opportunity to tell the story in this way. It's just really incredible. It's I don't know what I know. I sound like now I'm gushing about it, right? But
no, it's amazing. It's your baby. How long did it take to write? From the first idea to the completion of it.
Well, I had my experience with Voices from Krypton, and that took me 1.5 years to write, which for me is a very long time. I don't know how people devote like years and years and years to something. I just can't. I don't have the attention span for it. But this one probably, I would say about 6 months. If you to piece together all the writing time on it, I'd say about 6 months, because it wasn't just based on my interviews from Voices from Krypton. I had to go out and do a whole bunch of new interviews. And Zack Snyder was one of them. And we had an hour with Zack to talk to him about his 3 films. And different people like that. We like to bring it as up to date as we possibly could. It was the comic writers. It was Mark Waid. It was Philip Kennedy Johnson. It was the people on Superman and Lois. It was the cartoon, My Adventures of Superman, all of this stuff that is currently happening with Superman. And so that's really
incredible. It really is. We had one of the guests recently, Natalie Moon, who was starring in Superman and Lois, the last one that they just did, that just wrapped up. Fascinating conversation, and having an opportunity to talk to her about being immersed in everything Superman. Really, he was the very first superhero, right?
For sure.
An international icon, a cultural cornerstone, really recognized in a way that's international, no matter where you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the common expression is, and it's true though, the 3 most recognizable symbols in the world are the cross, the Jewish star and the S on Superman's chest, the S symbol. Those are the signs that people know that's that S everywhere around the world. And it's really amazing. It's just, again, it captures people's imaginations somehow. And it's not just because he can fly. I really think it started that way because that's what captured me as a kid was, oh, look at this guy flying around, right? It was so cool.
Mm-hmm.
But it became much more than that, And to me, it's like I'm looking at all these different versions of Superman. And again, sorry, this has become a bit of a cliche with me, is when people say to me, well, who's your favorite Superman? My response is always Christopher Reeve. However, I follow the S. It's like whoever's wearing the S, that's where I am. And that's, so it's more about the character and what he represents and wanting to follow that rather than saying, because I know people who were like on the George Reeves show, I was mentioning this earlier, they were like, well, I only like George Reeves as Superman. I don't care about Superman beyond that. I care about George Reeves.
Yeah, because I grew up with the television version.
Yeah, exactly.
And he, of course, he had an interesting life and story, and people felt very connected to that as well. And sometimes you can be, typecast, and people feel, especially being Superman. I mean,
oh yeah,
people expect you to be that, image 24/7, and that can be daunting.
And especially, I mean, and he's, there were interviews with him from the 50s where he talked about the fact that he couldn't really go to bars and things because people would want to pick a fight with Superman. And that's all they need is to have, like a news story about how Superman either hit somebody or somebody hit Superman. He started taking judo lessons for that reason, actually, to take care of himself if anybody should approach him. But he was a guy, look, back then, the 50s, the 60s, you do a popular role, you were typecast in that role. And Hollywood couldn't see beyond that. They would pigeonhole you that way and say, well, you can't do these roles because you're known as this character. Today, they'd welcome it. It's like, oh, well, you play Superman. Well, that'll bring box office to us. So that'll bring ratings to us. So, that's great that he's that. But back then, he was trapped, and unlike Adam West, he never got the opportunity because Adam West had the same problem with the typecasting. But Adam West got to discover the impact he made. And the fact that people loved him of all ages, it wasn't just a bunch of little kids that loved him, or the fact that those kids
had fun with it. Right.
Yeah, and those kids grew up to still love him. George Reeves never had that opportunity. He thought he was beloved by little kids and that was it. And he didn't realize, I think, the impact he was making. So where he was so lost towards the end of his life that he took his life, had he been around in the 60s and 70s when the nostalgia crazes would go, he'd recognize and be in demand and would have made a lot of money. Frankly, I mean,
now the Comic Cons, conventions, and all the TV stars, the child stars, they're all doing that now. From every TV show, and it's music, all of it. It's incredible the connection. They found a way to, keep it alive for people too, right?
Absolutely, and that's the thing. You think you're trapped by it. There are two ways you can go with that being trapped. You can become bitter and reject it and have nothing to do with it, or you embrace it, you recognize how much people love you, and you turn that to your advantage, however that advantage may take, whether it's, again, doing autograph shows, using it to get other roles, whatever it may be, there is a way to use it. Because so many, you think the cast of Gilligan's Island wasn't just as typecast as he was? Of course they were, right? I mean, or the Star Trek actors. I mean, they were, they all get typecast as these things, and none of them made money from it, really.
The Brady Bunch and Partridge Family and all of those shows.
Culture sensations, or the things that live on, they all have the same problem. And back then, of course, they didn't make the money. Now the cast of Friends, the cast of The Big Bang Theory,
they all get. The residuals are extraordinary.
Millions, literally millions of dollars from these
Barbara
things.
Eden has been somebody who has really always embraced that role of Jeannie. She just really took that, and ran with it, and still does in her, early 90s at the time of this show. And of course, Dick Van Dyke, the beloved Dick Van Dyke, just knock on wood or cardboard, whatever, 99 at the time of this show, and fully gets it. He gets what people feel about him, whether it's Mary Poppins, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the Dick Van Dyke Show, or anything else, which I think is fantastic. There's some recent guests we've had on who get it too, who've really embraced it. And they've sort of even come out of the woodwork even more to go. They've done other things, but they've come back out of the woodwork, because I think nostalgia and retro are very comforting and needed, and people are craving that. Butch Patrick, we had the other night, Eddie Munster from the Munsters, he completely gets the whole thing, why people love the Eddie Munster character and other things he's done. And somebody else too, Kathy Garver from Family Affair, who was Sissy. She's very prolific in keeping the character alive and celebrating Family Affair. So I think, like you say with George, I think if he had been around longer, he would have gotten a chance to taste some of that retro feeling and what people really felt about it, in a way that transcends anything he would have imagined, right?
Right, absolutely. And look at the reaction he got on Lucy, and the fact that today, all these years later, that episode is still so beloved.
It
and,
is.
and he's amazing in it. This is the thing.
Is.
His charm, his warmth just shines through there. When he smiles, he just lights up and he just touches you with that smile. And even the ending when he's out on the ledge with Lucy and right. And Ricky's, this is the craziest thing you've done in 15 years. She's
trying to get him in, the pigeons and everything.
Yeah,
and
exactly. She's trapped on Superman has to help her in. But then he does this pose from the comics where he's got his arms folded across his chest and his leg crossed over the other. And he goes, wait a minute, Mr. Ricardo, are you saying that you've been married to this woman for 15 years? Yeah, 15 years. And he says, they call me Superman, right? And, oh, my God,
Great
he's
line.
just amazing. He's just amazing in it.
Absolutely. You probably always enjoyed when the Thanksgiving Day parade came down in New York. The floats would come down, and there's Superman coming down.
Sure.
Yeah, right? I think it's great. I think these shows and not just the shows, because again, this is based also on comic books and movies. And of course, we lost Christopher Reeve as well, who is always affiliated now forever with Superman, and some of the others who've taken on the role. These are iconic figures that transcend anything that, we could even think about, because there's so much emotion that's come from it. And again, I think the messages are important for even younger generations to discover today. As crazy as the world is today, and seems like there's no compassion or empathy, or people don't, they're just moving forward. They don't take time for one another. If you watch any of these types of shows we're talking about, this real classic television, or even pick up comic books, the movies, you get the sense of what they were trying to say, right?
Oh, absolutely. Hey, look at the enduring popularity of something like the Andy Griffith Show, made in 1960. Here we are in almost 2025, and people still love that show, the values it represents. And I just started doing a rewatch of that show recently, and I'm like amazed at how good it is. Those early episodes, I'm only on the first season again, and I haven't seen them in years. And they transcend the time. They transcend this little hick town should not be appealing to people in 2025 with the nonstop pace that we're on. And yet it does.
Mayberry, yeah.
Mayberry is wonderful. The show is wonderful. Its values are wonderful. And they're not corny. See, that's the whole thing. Now you could look at Leave It to Beaver and say, as wonderful as it is, you could say, are those values corny? Does it come across a little corny? Sure it does. Of course it does. Still beloved. Don't get me wrong. But something about a show like the Andy Griffith Show or Superman or any of these shows that really put their hearts into the storytelling just continue to live on. And that's truly amazing, considering that people have the attention span of gnats these days, that they can still embrace it and enjoy it. It just really is amazing to me.
Did you feel bad when they tore down the old Columbia, the Warner Ranch, with all the facades for the TV shows for Bewitched and Jeannie and Hazel? And I know, I wish there was a way that they could have somehow preserved some of them, moved them in. Like, there's a Superman museum, there's a Lucy Desi museum, a comedy museum. Maybe there could have been some sort of a museum or a park or something. Even if there was admission, people would pay to see the facade for the Bewitched house or Jeannie house or Leave It to Beaver house, Father Knows Best house, that whole thing. And it's a shame that it's all gone now.
It is, and it's amazing. It's like a lot of these iconic houses were like right next door to each other, or down the street from each other. So that was kind of neat. But
That
yeah,
were
it's
used in so many
yeah,
shows. You're kind of like, okay, that wait a minute. The Bewitched house was also Dr. Bellow's house on I Dream of Jeannie.
Mannix used to use the Brady Bunch house. I mean, it's like,
That's right.
yeah, they used to shoot in the Brady Bunch house, the sets on the Brady Bunch.
Butch
So
Patrick said that he wished they had kept the Munsters house. He said it was used later on in Desperate Housewives. And he said when he saw it in color in Desperate Housewives in the background, it looked like an ad for Sherman-Williams paint or something.
right, correct.
He had hoped that that would be something that was iconic too, a house that was like that.
Right.
The Munsters house. Did you get into any of those too? The Munsters, Adams
Oh,
Family, any
sure.
of
I
that?
mean, look, I enjoy all that stuff, and with the job at Women's World, I focus almost exclusively on classic TV. So I am always writing some aspect of these shows. I'm exploring them in different ways, either through profiles of the actors, profiles of the shows themselves, and so yeah. So I'm able to tap into all of these shows that I grew up with and write about them for the modern audience. But based on the page views, people do seem to enjoy them. So, they do quite well. And it's obvious to me that the people are still connecting with them. But for me, yeah, I grew up with all that stuff. And there's so many of those shows. I look, at 8 years old, I fell in love with The Odd Couple. I was an 8-year-old. I went
Oh,
to see
yes.
the movie with
Sure.
Walter Matthau. How many
Jack
8-year-olds
Lemmon.
are going to love it? And Jack Lemmon. Then the show came on, and then I mentioned to you before we started recording that one of my first interviews was with Neil Simon, the creator of The Odd Couple. And so, but what kid falls in love with The Odd Couple? You know what I mean? But I did, and it never went away. I
An
remember when
old
they announced
soul that was born 20 years too late, probably, right? Yeah.
there you
That's
go.
what I've
But
been told by Dad.
yeah, you were born 20 years too late. Yeah, but then you'd be 20 years older, so be okay with that.
That is true. Right, exactly.
Look at it
I'd have
that
to
way.
pause the show for some medicine updates or something, right?
Precisely. Here, let me tell you about arthritis.
I was going to say, sponsored by Geritol.
Exactly.
Everything back then was sponsored by Geritol. All
It
the
was.
game shows and everything. The game shows are something
Oh,
too. I
yeah.
love the game shows.
I just did a piece on Monty Hall. I mean, and let's
Oh, you
make it.
did?
I just did a piece on that. Yeah, it's
Let's Make a Deal and so much more.
yeah,
This is the definitive history, which is amazing. And what I love about it, you flip through over 400 pages, which really detail every adventure and incarnation of Superman across comics, television, animation, movies, even the video games too. We haven't touched on that, but video games as well. And you've really been able to pull together all-star contributors, essential interviews and insights from those who really have shaped the Man of Steel's journey, cultural impact. You've got the filmmakers, the actors, the writers, the illustrators. So it isn't just you talking about how much you have loved Superman and everything Superman, but the people who are actually in on it too. And you fully explore the entire Superman family, including Superboy, Power Girl, Supergirl, the Legion of Super Pets, Crypto, Streaky, Beppo, Comet, and Fuzzy, the Crypto Mouse, Bizarro, lots of Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen comics, of course, and all the villains, Lex Luthor, Brainiac, and all the rest, Doomsday. It's really encompasses the whole thing, brings us back. And there's also pull-out cards too, right? Posters, mini books, other interactive things that bring back the Metropolis's protector to life. And if that's not all, folks, but wait, there's more.
always more.
Exclusive unseen treasures from the 85-year history of Superman, taken these images never before seen directly from DC and Warner Brothers archives, all in this definitive book here. That must have been, a daunting task.
It is, but it was the same thing with the other book as well. You're trying to tell. You can't call something definitive if you're not covering all aspects of that character or that subject. In this case, that was an important part of it, to make sure that everything was covered. I mean, when I did Voices from Krypton, it was a very linear telling of the story. And with Superman: The Definitive History, we broke them into different sections. So you ended up with, a chapter on all the movies, a chapter on all the animation, a chapter on all the comics, covering the whole comic book history, with pullouts and things like that, and features related to them. But the idea was to approach the two books very differently, but make sure that you could come away from both of them with the complete story, and yet something different from it, even though it's the complete story from two different vantage points, from the oral history thing and the more narrative thing. Because the oral history is allowing people to tell the history as they see it, and you try to guide it on the proper path of what that history was. But there are going to be differences of opinion. There are going to be almost arguments between the different voices of this guy remembering it this way, this person remembering it that way. With Superman: The Definitive History, no, this is the historical look at Superman. This is the real history, and the interviews are there to support that history. And that it's just a very different approach. I mean, it's just, one is saying this is the official history, and this is more like, here are people's memories of the history. That's what the oral history is, right? That's, you're telling the story and you've got the facts right, but you've got people's memories, which again may vary. The definitive history, though, is more of a straight thing, but that's the trick. Make it definitive, as the title says. Make sure you're covering every aspect of that character. And you're still going to miss things, I mean, I'm sure people are going to look at this book and say, "Oh yeah, but they didn't cover this, this, or this." But it's pretty damn comprehensive. I mean, I think so. Yeah, so that's the trick.
It's the comprehensive definitive.
Yeah, it is. I think it is anyway, but yeah.
You've had an opportunity, and we're going to have you back to talk about Planet of the Apes and some of the other things you've worked on, because again, there's so much that you've covered. Something else we wanted to slip in here, and that's this. Yeah. Tell us about this. This is cool too.
What it was is many years ago, I created this character called Fleischer, which was more of a comedic take on Superman, basically. Because I'm not a good drama writer, but I thought I could be good with silly humor, and that's what I've done. And so Fleischer would show up in comic strips online. We've got a number of comic books that just haven't been published yet, two have, but that we haven't done anything with. But it's a character I've always loved. And a few years back, I took the L. Frank Baum novel, The Marvelous Wizard of Oz, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and decided I'm going to take Dorothy out, put Fleischer in because the novel's public domain, and rewrite where I need to make the adventure about Fleischer. And I started that. I put it aside. When I turned 60, I started looking at like all unfinished projects, saying, I got to finish some of these things. I think the ideas are too good. So I recently finished Fleischer and the Wonderful Wizard of Oz. And it's the L. Frank Baum novel. I mean, there's a guy named John Fricke, who's an expert on all things Judy Garland and the Oz. And he's written Wizard of Oz. And he's written like 8 books on the subject. And he's renowned. Well, John read it. I nervously sent it to John to read it. He loved it. He said, yes, Baum is here. The humor can be sophomoric, but it's still funny. And it is sophomoric, and hopefully it's still funny. So I got his endorsement saying how good it is, and that made me feel wonderful. And I hope people will check it out. It's just a silly little adventure, but it's sort of like a humorous view of Superman going to the land of Oz.
It's incredible. The illustration people that you use, that you have access to, I think is incredible. Just look at even the cover.
Yeah, we've got a number of artists inside.
Got top-notch people around you. Yeah.
And these are just writers from different places from different places who I reached out to and I've worked with in the past on the Fleischer comic strips in some cases and things like that. And I said, look, I'm doing this book. I want to do illustrations. And we even have it's not done yet, but there's at Webtoons, there's a Fleischer and the Wonderful Wizard of Oz comic strip. And that's like telling the same story with differences because it's a comic strip. But we're like 25 chapters in, and I think there's like another 6 or 7 to go to finish that story. Again, it's just goofy entertainment, but you know what? There's nothing wrong with goofy entertainment. I mean, I've always found a good escape in that, and I hope that I can do the same thing with this.
What are some other things you're working on that are coming up? I know you're heading to Japan, which is fantastic, doing some familial research there.
Exactly.
But what are some other things you're excited about? Are there other topics, other people, other things in the classic world that are on your radar? Gee, I really want to dig into that, or it's something that really never was brought up to talk about. I mean, they haven't. This is, I guess, classic television in a way. Maybe he isn't as much of a household name, but there isn't really a lot about Ernie Kovac.
And not to be rude, I think the audience for Ernie Kovacs would be very, very limited. Not that that stopped me in the past, I think, but I don't know how many people still know Ernie Kovac. You do, and I do.
He passed away so young.
Exactly. Yeah. And I just don't know that his presence is still felt the same way that you could do a book on it. You could do a book on anything. Hey, look, one of the things I'm doing is back in 1990 for a small publisher. I had done a book on the TV show Wise Guy, the undercover cop show starring Ken Wall.
Yeah.
Well, I've been working on and off, to do an update of that book, to bring it to the show that started binge television, basically. And I've gotten the cooperation of a bunch of people. Ken Wall, the star of that show, has spent I think it's a total of 15 hours on the phone with me talking about Wise Guy. And I got Kevin Spacey and Jerry Lewis before he passed away. And so I've got all these big names that I am determined to do that, and also update a book I did on The Odd Couple in 1990 as well. So it's like I'm dipping back into these things that I sort of feel are incomplete.
Which is
because
great.
I've written books on pretty much, I can't think of too many subjects I have not written books on that I love. And I like to write books about things that I'm passionate about. And I've done Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica and James Bond and Star Wars and John Wick and Buffy, Angel, the Galactica I mentioned. That's that book ended up being just so much stronger than I thought it would be. It's just really a strong oral history of both versions of that show. So I have tapped into all those things. And people have said to me after I finished the 2 Superman books, you probably never want to hear the name Superman again. And it's like, are you kidding? It's like I cranked the John Williams theme up both times when I finished. And there are some Superman things I'm trying to get off the ground now to still do some more writing about Superman, because there's so much left to say still, believe it or not.
For the movies and for the television shows, all of them, the music is so crucial too. And the music that's used, of course, the theme, iconic.
Absolutely. And, I'm one of those people that thinks the John Williams theme should be to Superman as the James Bond theme is to James Bond, that no matter what actor is playing Bond, no matter what filmmaker is behind it, that the Bond theme is the mainstay. That's the thing that continues. And I think with John Williams, I'm not saying you have to use a note for note, but I'm hopeful that James Gunn will get some part of that in there, because it is so iconic. But watch any montage of Superman through the decades to the John Williams theme, it's perfect. It just captures that character in a way that no other theme, as good as they've been, has been able to. So that theme is, themes are always important, but I happen to think that one is just so significant for that character, the way Bonds was to him. So
themes can really be, you don't hear, especially with television, everything is right onto the first scene. They'll show the crime scene right there and they'll do ding ding or something. That's it. You don't hear the Dick Van Dyke Show theme and all of and then there's Maude and all of these themes, and you'd hear it, you'd be humming along and you'd be like, all right, we know what's coming on, All in the Family, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I miss all that and jingles too. I'm a big jingle guy, promotion, promos, jingles. I think all of that hopefully will come back at some point, because I think it created a mood, it set a tone, and you just felt even more connected because of the music. We had Lloyd Schwartz on, of course, from his dad, Sherwood Schwartz, created Brady Bunch, Gilligan's Island, worked on Love American Style, all these. We talked about the underscoring, the music when changing scenes, and the importance of the music to enhance what you're seeing visually is so incredibly important.
Yeah, for sure. And it is a lost art in a lot of ways.
It's a lost art, exactly. Is there anything?
Big Bang Theory, I'm glad they had a theme song. Right? They had a great song. So, but not a lot of shows don't.
Well, now they have, the streaming services or whatever, where you can skip theme, and I'm like, no, don't skip it. I want to hear,
But I think part of the problem with the theme song thing is because everything is so segmented now.
Right.
You're not creating that sort of that collective thing where we're all going to go sit there and go, just sit right back and you'll hear it. You're not
It was an
doing
event
that anymore because
right.
It's all, you watch it when you watch it. You watch it on your phone, you watch it on TV.
Next. They don't want to see the theme again, exactly. the theme again. Is there anything Superman, before we go, that hasn't been touched upon? Meaning books and comics, television, film, Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, video games, I mean, just everywhere. Is there any element of content where Superman, I mean, like you said, podcasts, everything else, anything where Superman has not been used? It was on lunch boxes, T-shirts. I mean,
merchandise is its whole
merchandising.
Thing. Radio show it was, the animated shorts, the movie serials, every new medium. He did a Broadway musical in the 60s.
Right.
I mean, what hasn't he done? There's been audio adventures. There's been, audio books. I can't think of anything he hasn't done except maybe Superman on Ice. We're on
coming up in February for Superman on Ice. And you would be in the front row at the Nassau Coliseum on Long Island with your tickets, with the family, seeing it, wouldn't you? With the S shirt on.
Maybe. See, I draw the line sometimes. Like if I go to a Superman movie, I don't always wear the Superman shirt. And certainly when I went to Comic-Con, I never wore the Superman shirt because I just felt like I had to draw a line in the sand between journalist ed and fan ed. He's
the professional, right? Exactly.
Yeah, basically, yeah. And I never wanted to cross that line,
Exactly right.
He was Star Trek. You ever wear the ears? No. Not once.
And he doesn't take the Superman behind him everywhere he goes either.
No, he'd be a little hard to do, but he'd have to take me.
Although if you took it to the DMV, they might accelerate you through the line. It might actually work to your advantage.
Weighs about 75 pounds, though. I think it'd be a little hard to shuffle that down the aisle.
It is heavy, huh?
Yeah, well, 75 pounds worth. Yeah, it's fiberglass.
I was going to say, is it resin or is it fiberglass, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. Why do you love doing this so much, Ed? You've been doing this since you were a kid.
Why do I love? I don't know why I love it. I just do. And, I am one of the few people that I know that can say they can get out of bed every day and do the thing they love. And that may sound corny and stuff, but I don't mean it that way. But I don't know a lot of people that are happy or have been happy for 40 years doing what they do. But each day I get up, set the alarm, wake up, come down and start doing work, start writing. And I don't resent it. I don't say, oh God, another day. No, I love doing this. So, and I have loved this stuff, like you said, since I was a little kid. So, I assume I'll be doing it for the rest of my life, and I have no problem with that. It's never tiring for me. There's always something new to say or a new person to speak to. I always say that if I could do interviews and not write them, that'd be fine too, because I love the interview process.
Right, the oral.
So, it's just so much fun that I don't have to write it. But I will if you're going to pay me to do it. Okay, but
exactly.
If that's my job, then I'll do it. But I just enjoy speaking to people and doing the interviews.
As we were saying, Superman has left an indelible mark on all of our lives, and younger generations are getting a chance to also experience it through the various ways, shapes, and forms. Superman, where do you feel it ranks in classic history of the arts and entertainment and television and all the rest for you? Where do you think it ranks?
It's right up there. I mean, look, there are certain things that I'm truly passionate about. Superman, the Beatles, Star Trek, James Bond. Those are sort of the four biggies for me of the things that I'm really, really passionate about. I mean, there are other things like Planet of the Apes and things like that.
Yeah.
But I'd have to say, I used to think it was James Bond was the top. And then I'd stop and say, nah, it's really the Beatles, because every day I listen to Beatles music and it never gets boring for me. But then when I was doing these books, I realized it really is this character. It really has meant more to me. And I think the interactions I've had with people have been so positive that he has climbed to the top of that short list of 4 or 5 things that I'm truly, passionate about. But I'd have to say that Superman's at the top of the list. Yeah.
And globally, just for the world, where do you think it ranks high on the
Well,
list too, huh?
I don't know. I mean, that's a tougher one to say because, like, if you did, they look at like who the most popular superhero is, and it's always Spider-Man, and
Yeah,
then it's always Batman, and so
Batman.
Superman kind of falls down on that list. So I don't know that I would say that Superman um, is at the top of people's lists around the world, but I will say that there is something so comforting in him that, and that as he has been all these years, that people just take it for granted in the sense of, oh yeah, I got Superman. He's right over here. I don't have to put him at the top of my list, but I got him.
Mm.
He means this to me, and that sort of thing. So I don't know if that's a cop out answer or not, but I don't mean it that way. But so that's why I think he does struggle with his image. I do think there are a lot of people who think he's out of step with the times and things like that. But then I watch things like Superman and Lois, which has absolutely nailed it for 4 seasons, or the car, which just finished its second season recently. They nail it. They understand the character, even though it's told in an anime type style. They really nail it. I have faith that James Gunn is going to nail it next summer with the new Superman movie. So there's so much positive happening. People can say he's out of step with the times, but every time DC relaunches or Warner Brothers relaunches their franchise, their movies, what do they start with? Superman. Every time. Man of Steel started it. Superman the movie started it. Now Superman in 2025 is going to start it again. It's just on TV. Smallville started off, really led to the Arrowverse, and then ultimately Superman and Lois. You can follow that track. So whatever people say about this character, he seems to be the first one people turn to when they're saying we're ushering in the next age of superhero whatever. They seem to start with Superman every time. So there's got to be a reason for that.
When you mow the lawn, does the family call you Superman?
Wow. Hey, you didn't pay somebody to mow the lawn? Are you kidding? That's what they say to me.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's like we're on our third dog since my wife and I have been married. And we had a dog named Clifford and we had a dog named Chloe. And now we have a dog named Crypto. And previously when I said, hey, why don't I just name the dog Crypto? My wife would say, yeah, do you really want to be walking down the street wearing a Superman t-shirt saying Crypto, Crypto? I was like, all right, that's a good point. But then with this dog, since it's our third and likely our last, sad to say, I'm like, you know what? Who cares? I'll walk down the street calling Crypto, Crypto. I don't care. So there you go.
And today, because of crypto being popular as far as, a currency to a degree, they may think you're playing off that too.
People said, really? You named your dog after money? I
Crypto.
said, no, look at his collar. Because he has S's on his collar.
Right.
I was like, no, I didn't name him after money. he's
A
after
dog
Superman.
named Crypto and a cat named Bitcoin.
There you go. Right, exactly. There you go.
You're a delight to talk to, my friend. Thanks for stopping by the Jim Masters Show series. Really thoroughly enjoyed it as we went back in time, remembering the classic Superman in all of its incarnations. And of course, congratulations on the definitive history. Folks, if you are a Superman connoisseur, aficionado, collector, lover, or just want to learn more, this is the go-to right here. And of course, prior to that, Voices from Krypton, another one in the collection, and many, many more books that we're going to have Ed come back and talk about here on the show. This was really a pleasure, my friend, and we encourage folks to go to the website there to learn more about our very special guest and the books and everything. The books, are they on Amazon and Barnes & Noble?
The books are all on Amazon. I'm seeing the address you put up for me. It's actually edgrosswriter.com.
A writer, yes, writer.
So
Writer.
no.
Good thing. A little on-the-spot proof writing.
There you go, right?
So
yeah,
Gross
all available.
Writer.
edgrosswriter.com. Yeah. So that's my Blue Sky thing and my ID.
Oh, you're on Blue Sky too? Yeah.
Yeah, I just joined that recently. It seems to be in vogue right now. So I'm just trying to build up my following there. So
and is it happening? Are you able to, do you find
slow.
people are going on it?
It's slow, but I'm not a big creature of social media in the sense of people love to talk about every aspect of their lives on social media. Like, oh, I had a headache today. Okay. I kind of use it just to promote articles, promote books, things like that. So I think because I'm so sort of pragmatic about how I use them, it's resulted in less people following me, but that's okay. It'll grow slowly, and that's okay.
Exactly. There again on the screen is the actual website, folks, edgrosswriter.com. Although if you put in Ed Gross, probably it'll take you right to it anyway.
My name does come up, I have to say.
It
I mean,
does.
you do something long enough, it gets recognized. So
It sure does. This was fantastic, my friend. Truly, it was a pleasure to meet you, and I appreciate your generosity of time as well. And I hope you'll come back and see us again here on the Jim Masters Show. It was really a pleasure, and I hope you enjoyed the time with me going down memory lane together as much as I have with you, Ed.
Happy to come back. Just let me know when.
Absolutely, and I hope you enjoyed yourself. You and Superman behind you. I hope you had a good time.
He's always happy. Anyway, so there you go. Thanks again, Jim. Appreciate it.
You are very welcome. Take care, my friend, and congratulations on the books.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Here you go, folks. Here is that site, edgrosswriter.com. So if you saw earlier, it said rights, disregard, though I think if you type that in, it'll probably bring you right to them anyway. Sometimes it happens with the internet, but make sure you jot that down because it's a great website. You can learn more about our very special guests and all the material and so much more. Phenomenal conversation. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, of course, we would love it if you interact with us here at the Jim Masters Show, Entertainment Lifestyle, Celebrity Talk Show Series. Be sure and give this episode a like. There's a thumbs up icon on the YouTube channel. Make sure you click like. We would love that. And leave a comment for us. Drop a comment in the comment section below. Interact with us. Tell us about your Superman memories and so much more. Share this episode on your social media. We would love that. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is Jim Masters TV, where you can find so many incredible episodes, hundreds of them, celebrity friends and guests who stop by JMS to share all kinds of good times with us and with you. First time here on the Jim Masters Show, we welcome you. Spread the word. Don't keep it a secret. Climb on top Mount Everest and tell everybody about our unique series here. We love having you here. Jim Masters here is saying, don't forget to love one another, take care of one another, do the very same for yourself. I thank you for your time this time. Till next time, we thank once again our very special guest, Ed Gross. He's a writer, historian. He's a senior entertainment writer, journalist, and a super fan of Superman and so much more. The definitive history, talking about it right here on the Jim Masters Show. Be well, everybody. Come see us again. And as I mentioned, there are lots of past guests who've been with us. Stephanie Powers from Heart to Heart was with us recently. Kathy Garver has been with us, and Butch Patrick, and so many others. And we talked about Burt Ward, who played Robin on Batman. He's been with us several times. And speaking of Leave It to Beaver, Jerry Mathers, who's with us as well. If you like the classic TV folk, they've been through here. Loretta Swit from MASH has been a guest on our show. Glenn Scarpelli from One Day at a Time. All the favorites have been with us here. We love it. You be well. Come see us again on the Jim Masters Show. Spread the word, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody, and cheers.